The city exhaled decay, a miasma of acidic rain, nutrient-paced fumes, and the low, omnipresent hum of failing infrastructure. My own life mirrored the cityscape. Julian Croft, portrait artist, or rather, former portrait artist. In a world obsessed with neural filters and instant synaptic uploads, demand for hand-painted souls had evaporated like puddles on hot ferroconcrete. My loft, once a vibrant studio, was now just a dusty, credit-draining box overlooking a perpetually gray skyline. Canvases stacked against the wall like tombstones of a dead career. Landlord notices weren't just arriving, they were breeding. It was desperation, pure and unadulterated, that led me to answer the cryptic summons. Not an email, not a datapad ping, but a physical, cream-colored card slipped under my door, embossed with a single, intricate symbol, something like a stylized loom interwoven with a neural network. The message, printed in archaic, elegant type, was brief. Seeking apprentice. Unique aptitude for empathic resonance and fine detail pattern recognition required. Prior artistic experience essential. Generous compensation, full residency. Utmost discretion non-negotiable. If capable, present this card at the Obsidian Gate, Wharf District, Sector 9, tomorrow, precisely at the 13th hour. No name, no company, just the symbol and the impossible instructions. Wharf District Sector 9 was derelict, abandoned decades ago, swallowed by rising, polluted tides and jurisdictional neglect. The Obsidian Gate sounded like pretentious nonsense. Empathic resonance, more likely a euphemism for gullible artist. Yet, generous compensation and full residency were sirens' calls I couldn't ignore. What was the alternative? Becoming nutrient-paced myself? The next day, navigating the decaying, half-flooded walkways of Sector 9 felt like traversing the skeletal remains of a forgotten civilization. Rusted gantries clawed at the perpetually overcast sky. Water, slicked with chemical iridescence, lapped against crumbling plasteel walls tagged with faded gang symbols. The air tasted of salt, rust, and terminal neglect. Precisely at the 13th hour, marked by the dissonant chime of a distant, malfunctioning clock tower, I found it. Not a gate, but an archway impossibly carved from a single, enormous block of polished black obsidian, seamlessly integrated into the decaying warehouse facade. It hummed faintly, absorbing the ambient light, radiating a subtle coolness. The loom/neuron symbol from the card was etched above it. Hesitantly, holding the cream-colored card aloft like a dubious passport, I stepped through the archway. The transition was jarring. Not a physical threshold, but a shift in atmosphere. The damp chill and salt stench of the wharf vanished, replaced by dry, cool, sterile air carrying the faintest scent of ozone and something else, something organic and slightly sweet, like blooming night flowers. The low hum intensified, becoming a clear, resonant frequency that vibrated pleasantly in my bones. I stood in a space that defied the warehouse's exterior. A vast, minimalist atrium, walls and floor crafted from the same polished obsidian, reflecting the soft, indirect light emanating from unseen sources in the impossibly high ceiling. It felt less like a building and more like the interior of some colossal, alien artifact. Utter silence reigned, save for that persistent, resonant hum. In the center of the atrium stood a figure, waiting. Tall, unnaturally thin, draped in flowing robes of a material that seemed to shift between deep indigo and absolute black. Their face was hidden in the shadows of a deep cowl, but long, elegant hands, pale as bone china, rested clasped before them. Julian Croft. The figure's voice echoed softly in the vast space, genderless, melodic, yet carrying an undeniable weight of centuries. You received the summons. You possessed the sensitivity. It wasn't a question. I, I received the card. I stammered, feeling utterly out of my depth. Who are you? What is this place? I am the Weaver. The figure replied simply, gesturing with one pale hand towards the far end of the atrium. And this is the Atelier. You are here to learn the craft, to become an apprentice. Craft? Weaving what? The Weaver began to glide silently across the obsidian floor, robes flowing around them like liquid shadow. Memories, Julian Croft. Emotions, experiences, the raw, fragmented threads of consciousness. We gather them. We repair them. We weave them into tapestries. My mind struggled to grasp the concept. Weaving memories? Whose memories? The lost, the broken, the forgotten. The Weaver murmured, stopping before a section of the obsidian wall that now glowed faintly from within. Those whose patterns have frayed, whose echoes linger, dissonant and incomplete. The wall became translucent, revealing a chamber beyond. My breath caught. It looked like a fusion of an organic laboratory and an arcane workshop. In the center, suspended in a soft, pulsating golden light, was the loom. It wasn't mechanical. It looked alive. A colossal, intricate structure of shimmering, translucent fibers, like fungal mycelium or neural pathways woven from solidified light, pulsed gently, connected by glowing filaments to dozens of crystalline pods arranged around it. Within each pod, faint, human-shaped shadows shifted, indistinct and ephemeral. The air hummed powerfully here, resonating with the loom's silent, rhythmic pulse. The faint, sweet, floral scent was stronger, emanating directly from the loom itself. This, the Weaver gestured towards the impossible structure, is the Loom of Mnemosyne. The repository, the repair matrix. Repair matrix? Memories degrade. Trauma fractures the pattern. We restore coherence. We reweave the fragments into a complete tapestry, preserving the echo, easing its dissonance. The Weaver turned, their cowled face fixing on me, unseen eyes seeming to pierce the shadows. Your artistic sensitivity, your empathic resonance, allows you to perceive the subtle damages, the broken threads, the discordant colors within the fragments. You will learn to guide the loom, to mend the patterns. It sounded insane, beautiful, terrifying, utterly impossible. Yet, the pulsating loom before me, the humming energy, the shadowy figures in the pods, they felt undeniably real. Before you begin, the Weaver continued, producing a thin, obsidian datapad from within their robes, the protocols. They are absolute. Deviation compromises the patterns, risks catastrophic resonance cascade. The datapad displayed the rules, stark white text against the black screen. Interface only via designated apprentice node. Never directly touch the loom core or nutrient conduits. Limit integration sessions to prescribed durations. Prolonged exposure causes empathic bleed. Report any detected frayed ends, unstable/aggressive fragments, immediately. Do not attempt to weave personal memories or emotions into the tapestries. The holding pools, pods beta through zeta, are off limits without direct supervision. In case of resonance cascade alarm, auditory signal omega, sever immediate connection and proceed to designated safe chamber. Frayed ends, empathic bleed, resonance cascade. This wasn't just weaving. It sounded like handling volatile psychic material. Your node is prepared, the Weaver said, gesturing towards a smaller alcove containing a single, high-back chair surrounded by delicate, glowing filaments extending from the main loom structure. Place your hands upon the contact plates. Clear your mind. Allow the first fragment to integrate. Observe the pattern. Identify the damage. Your apprenticeship begins now. Heart pounding, a terrifying cocktail of fear and fascination coursing through me. I approached the chair. The filaments pulsed gently, emitting the faint, sweet scent. This was madness, but it was also the only path forward that wasn't slow decay in a gray apartment. Taking a deep breath, I sat down and placed my trembling hands onto the cool, smooth contact plates embedded in the chair's arms. The hum deepened, and the first fragmented images, colors, and emotions began to coalesce on the neural display integrated into the chair's hood, pulled from the loom, ready to be woven. My apprenticeship in the art of borrowed nightmares had begun. The moment my hands settled onto the cool obsidian contact plates, the world dissolved. It wasn't a violent jolt like the bioscan, but a smooth, insidious merging. The resonant hum of the Atelier intensified, flowing through the plates, up my arms, settling deep within my chest cavity, synchronizing with my own hesitant heartbeat. The glowing filaments surrounding the apprentice node chair brightened, their soft golden light pulsing in time with the loom core visible across the chamber. Then, the data stream began, not as images on a screen, but as direct sensory input flooding my consciousness. It felt organic, like tapping into someone else's optic nerve, their auditory pathways, their very emotional core. The interface wasn't digital. It felt biological, ancient, far beyond the crude cybernetics the world above relied upon. My first assigned fragment wasn't a complex narrative, but a raw, primal moment, looping endlessly. Panic. Small hands. My slash its hands, gripping damp, mossy stone. The smell of wet earth and approaching rain. Darkness pressing in, absolute, save for the faint, flickering glow of a faulty emergency light high above. Sound. The rhythmic, heavy drip, drip, drip of water echoing in a vast, subterranean space, and a low, guttural breathing sound, seemingly coming from all directions at once. Emotion, pure, unadulterated childhood terror. The feeling of being small, lost, hunted in the dark. A crushing weight of certainty that something unseen shared the space. Its presence felt in the unnatural cold, the way the shadows seemed to writhe just beyond the flickering light's edge. It repeated, the grip on the stone, the smell, the drips, the breathing, the terror, over and over. A perfect loop of fear. Observe the pattern, apprentice. The weaver's melodic, genderless voice resonated, not from the room, but directly within my mind, a calm counterpoint to the fragment's terror. Identify the fracture. The dissonance. Fracture? Dissonance. How? My own artistic training kicked in, overriding the immediate emotional bleed from the memory. I forced myself to see the memory not just as an experience, but as a composition. The terror was the dominant color, stark and overwhelming. But beneath it, there were broken threads. The rhythm of the dripping water felt subtly wrong, occasionally skipping a beat, creating a jarring arrhythmia in the soundscape. The flickering orange light wasn't just dim. It stuttered unnaturally, casting lurching, inconsistent shadows. The guttural breathing, while terrifying, felt incomplete, like a bass note missing its harmonic overtone. These were the flaws, the points where the original memory had perhaps frayed under the weight of trauma. Good. The weaver's thought echoed, sensing my analysis. Your resonance perceives the damage. Now, guide the loom. Focus your intent. Visualize coherence. Mend the threads. Guide the loom. How? As if in response to my unspoken question, the neural display integrated into the chair's hood flickered. It showed not the memory itself, but an abstract representation, swirling patterns of light and shadow, lines of energy representing the sensory input. And clearly visible within the pattern were the fractures I'd sensed, the arrhythmic drips showing as broken lines, the stuttering light as flickering static, the incomplete breathing as a dull, discordant color patch. Focus. Visualize coherence. I concentrated on the dripping sound, imagining its perfect, steady rhythm, drip, 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 smoothing out the broken line in my mind's eye. As I did, one of the delicate, glowing filaments connected to my chair pulsed, extending outwards, connecting with the vast, shimmering network of the loom core across the chamber. The abstract pattern on the display shifted, the broken line representing the drip becoming whole, steady. I shifted my focus to the flickering light, visualizing a constant, unwavering orange glow. Another filament pulsed, connected, and the static on the display smoothed into a steady line of light. Then, the breathing. I focused on the missing harmonic, imagining the full, resonant, terrifying sound. A third filament connected, and the dull color patch on the display deepened, gained complexity, became whole. As the final connection was made, the abstract pattern on the display shimmered, stabilized, pulsing with a gentle, coherent golden light. The looping memory fragment playing in my head shifted subtly. The drips became perfectly rhythmic. The light held steady. The breathing sound felt complete, terrifyingly present. The raw panic remained, but the jarring wrongness, the fractured quality, was gone. It felt restored, polished, a perfect, preserved nightmare. The pattern is stabilized, the weaver's mental voice intoned, carrying a note of approval. The echo is preserved. Disconnecting sequence initiated. The connection severed abruptly. The sensory input vanished, leaving me gasping, back in the sterile blue light of the integration pod room. When had I returned here? Had I ever left the chair? The restraints retracted. The pod slid open. Synaptic flush protocol commencing, the voice announced. The now familiar, agonizing blast of light and sound scoured my brain, leaving me nauseous and disoriented, but blessedly free, mostly, of the borrowed terror. Proceed to logging station. Log retrieved data and observed pattern corrections. Stumbling towards the logging station, my head pounded. The memory echo was faint now, but the feeling of accomplishment, of having mended something broken, lingered. Yet, beneath it, a sliver of unease remained. I hadn't just observed the fear, I had perfected it, restored its coherence. Was I preserving echoes? Or was I refining prisons? The distinction felt disturbingly unclear. As I sat down to log the horrifyingly clinical details, the image of the loom, pulsing gently, weaving threads of light and sorrow, felt less like a tool of preservation and more like something ancient, hungry, and infinitely patient. Log accepted. Analysis pending. Warning. Significant emotional residue detected. Monitoring protocol engaged. Next session, 1400H. The words lingered on the terminal screen long after I'd submitted the inadequate log for memory node 734 Alpha Sigma. Emotional residue. It felt like a clinical understatement for the phantom claws of terror still scraping at the edges of my consciousness. And monitoring protocol engaged sounded less like a safety measure and more like a leash being tightened. Then came the second message, the anonymous, untraceable warning flashing across the screen before vanishing. They lied. Flush doesn't erase. It scatters. Core 7 is bleeding. Beware node 801. Connection weakens the barrier. Do not integrate. My blood ran cold. Core 7 is bleeding. The phrase evoked a visceral, unsettling image, the vast, biological loom. This living archive of memories, somehow wounded, leaking fragmented consciousness like psychic ichor. And the flush protocol, the agonizing blast of light and sound meant to wipe my synaptic slate clean, didn't erase, but scattered? Scattered what? The memory fragments? My own thoughts. Was I now carrying shards of that childhood terror within me, ready to bleed into the next integration? Beware Node 801. The hours leading up to the 1400H session were a slow torment. My windowless room felt smaller, the sterile silence pressing in. I replayed the 734 fragment in my mind, searching for clues, for the source of the anomalous organic resonance spike the system had detected during my connection. Was it the unseen entity whose guttural breathing echoed in the dark? Was that what had somehow imprinted itself, leaving a non-human marker? The thought made my skin crawl. Every flicker of the overhead lights, every shift in the ventilation hum, felt like a premonition. The anonymous warning message, was it genuine? A fellow prisoner in this bizarre institution trying to help? Or was it a sophisticated psychological manipulation designed by Eris or Thorn or the Weaver to test my obedience, my stability? Trusting it felt dangerous. Ignoring it felt potentially fatal. When the green floor panels illuminated, signaling the path back to Integration Suite 4 Gamma, my feet felt like lead. Walking past the pulsating red glow of Chamber 7's vault door, the deep thump, thump, thump felt more insistent, like a heart beating faster, sensing the facility's growing instability. The integration pod waited, humming softly, its blue light cool and clinical, belying the psychic violence it facilitated. The room was empty. No heiress, no supervisor. Just the machine and the disembodied, genderless voice. Approached the pod, Archivist Kaido. Its calmness felt obscene. Prepare for integration cycle. Target, memory node 801 beta row. Chrono stamp, indeterminate. The node from the warning. My mouth felt dry as desert sand. Query. I forced the word out, my voice tight. My previous session triggered a level amber monitoring status due to high emotional residue and an organic resonance spike. Are you certain node 801 is safe for integration under these conditions? A micropause. Then, Supervisor Unit 9 confirms node 801 exhibits low baseline volatility. Enhanced synaptic flush protocols remain active. Proceed. Low volatility. Cold comfort. Resigned, I lay down. The restraints clicked shut, cold metal against my skin. The filaments descended. I braced myself for the sting, the pop, the feeling of connection. This time, the sensation felt deeper, more invasive, as if the pathways opened by the first integration hadn't fully closed, making the connection faster, more complete. Connection weakens the barrier. The warning flared in my mind. Connection established, the voice intoned. Initiating sensory integration cycle. Target, MN 801, BR, duration, 15 minutes. Darkness, silence. The hiss-pop crackle returned, weaving the broken piano melody. But beneath it, the new sound. Wet, pulsing, rhythmic, like being submerged in a vast, living ocean. Then, the memory fragment flooded in. Not terror this time. Something else. Immersion. Floating, suspended in a warm, viscous, nutrient-rich fluid. Utter darkness, yet a sense of vast, internal space. Awareness, but no distinct thoughts. Only the ceaseless flow of raw data. Shifting geometric patterns, pulsating colors, complex equations scrolling across a mental screen. A feeling of profound, almost blissful detachment. No fear, no joy, just processing. Existing as a single node within a vast, biological network. It was the feeling of being part of the core itself, adrift in its internal sea. This was horrifying in a different way. It wasn't just experiencing a memory, it felt like experiencing the storage medium, like being absorbed into the archive's fundamental consciousness. Do not integrate. The warning felt less like advice and more like a desperate plea for my own rapidly dissolving sense of self. I fought against the placid detachment, clinging to my name, my face, the memory of rain on Neo-Kyoto permaglass. Then, the corruption hit. Sharp, intrusive, wrong. A flicker of harsh orange light slicing through the internal darkness. The jarringly real sound of dripping water. The unmistakable, nauseating smell of rust and old blood. The sensations weren't part of the Node 801 memory. They bled through, sharp and agonizing, from somewhere else. From Node 734. The primal terror, the jagged teeth, the feeling of being cornered, shards of the previous nightmare, scattered by the flush, were now contaminating this placid core memory. The placid, processing state shattered, replaced by warring signals, conflicting sensations, the core's pain merging with the predator's fear. Core 7 is bleeding. I wasn't just witnessing it. I was feeling it tear itself apart from the inside. Core 7 is bleeding. The words resonated long after the anonymous message vanished, a chilling diagnosis of the vast, organic archive I was neurally tethered to. Flush doesn't erase. It scatters. The agonizing sensory scouring I'd endured hadn't cleansed me. It had merely dispersed the fragments of Node 734's primal terror deeper into my psyche, ready to resurface, ready to contaminate. Beware Node 801. Connection weakens the barrier. And my next connection, my next dive into the core's fragmented consciousness, was scheduled in mere minutes. The hours leading up to 1400H were a slow torture. My windowless room felt like a pressure cooker, the sterile silence amplifying the phantom echoes in my head. The drip, drip of unseen water, the faint smell of rust, the jarring flash of jagged teeth against an orange glow. Was I hallucinating? Or were the scattered fragments already starting to bleed through the weakened barrier between the archive and my own mind? The supervisor's level amber monitoring felt less like observation and more like watching a time bomb, waiting to see if I'd spontaneously combust into a mess of corrupted data and borrowed nightmares. Every slight fluctuation in the ventilation hum, every flicker of the bluish light, felt like a precursor, a system instability mirroring the core's supposed bleeding. When the green floor panels finally illuminated, signaling the summons back to Integration Suite 4 Gamma, my legs felt heavy, unresponsive. Walking past the pulsating red glow of Chamber 7's vault door, the deep thump, 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 felt almost frantic now, less like a heartbeat and more like something desperately trying to break free. Was that the barrier the warning mentioned? The one connection weakened? The integration pod sat waiting, its open maw humming softly. No supervisor, no heiress. Just the machine and the omnipresent, disembodied voice. The solitude felt deliberate, isolating. Easier to monitor and experiment without direct interaction. Approached the pod, Archivist Kaido. The voice echoed, devoid of inflection. Prepare for integration cycle. Target, memory node 801 beta row. Chrono stamp, indeterminate. My voice felt thick, dry. Query. I managed, trying to inject a node of clinical detachment I didn't feel. Given previous sessions' anomalies, cross-node contamination, organic resonance spike, level amber status. Is integration with node 801 confirmed safe? A fractional pause, perhaps a microsecond longer than before. Parameters adjusted by Supervisor Unit 9, the voice replied tonelessly. Enhanced synaptic flush protocols engaged. Node 801 exhibits low baseline volatility. Proceed. low baseline volatility, cold comfort when the entire core was supposedly bleeding. It felt like being assured the specific landmine you were about to step on was probably a dud. Resigned, defeated, I lay down. The restraints clicked home, cold and final. The articulated arms descended, the organic filaments hovered. I braced for the sting, the pop, the invasive connection. It felt faster this time, easier, the pathway already carved into my neurology. Connection weakens the barrier. Connection established, the voice intoned. Initiating sensory integration cycle. Target, MN 801, BR, duration, 15 minutes. Darkness, silence. The hiss-pop crackle returned, the broken piano melody weaving through it. But the underlying sound was there too, the wet, pulsing, rhythmic suction, like being inside a vast, sleeping lung. Then, immersion, floating, suspended, warm, viscous fluid surrounds, supports. No light, no sound save the deep, slow pulse. Suck, pulse, suck, felt through every cell. Awareness, but detached. Data streams flow, geometric proofs, stellar cartography of unknown galaxies, complex protein folding sequences, scrolling across an internal screen, processed, cataloged, integrated. No emotion, no identity, just pure, placid computation. Part of the whole, a node within the network. Calm, ordered, eternal. This was the core, not a memory in it, but the experience of it, of being a dormant piece of the biological archive itself. The lack of self was terrifying, yet seductively peaceful. Do not integrate. The warning felt distant, irrelevant noise against the overwhelming calm of the core's baseline state. I felt my own consciousness dissolving, merging, becoming one with the vast, ancient, processing mind. Then the intrusion, sharp, violent, wrong, a jagged shard of pure terror slicing through the placid data stream. Orange light, flickering, dying, dripping, rhythmic, echoing, rust, blood, the smell overwhelming, coppery, foul. Teeth, jagged, rows upon rows, snapping in the dark. Pain, tearing, consuming. The fragmented horror of node 734, scattered by the flush, now erupting within the core structure of node 801 like a virus. The placid calm shattered. The core memory recoiled, fragmented. The slow pulse became a frantic, a rhythmic hammering. The data streams dissolved into corrupted static. It wasn't just my mind experiencing the bleed-through. The core itself felt like it was having a seizure, its fundamental structure compromised by the invasive, predatory echo of 734. Core 7 is bleeding. I wasn't just connected to its pain. I was its pain, experiencing the archive tearing itself apart from the inside. Node corrupting node, nightmare bleeding into nightmare. The barrier hadn't just weakened, it felt like it was dissolving entirely. The integration cycle wasn't just showing me the core's state. It felt like I was experiencing its corruption, its fragmentation, its pain directly. The warning wasn't just about node 801. It was about the entire damaged, bleeding system. And I was directly interfaced with its corrupted heart. The placid ocean of biological computation had become a raging storm of conflicting data, primal fear warring with detached analysis, the boundaries dissolving not just between nodes, but between the archive and the archivist. Just as the sensory overload threatened to obliterate my own fragile sense of self, the connection severed. Abruptly, violently, like a plug ripped from a socket, tearing something fundamental in the process. The blue light in the pod flared blindingly, then snapped off, plunging me back into the physical sensation of the cold couch, the restraints, my own ragged breathing echoing in the sudden silence. Integration cycle terminated prematurely. The genderless voice announced, its usual calm laced with a faint, almost undetectable note of alarm. Anomaly detected. Cross-node contamination. Synaptic echo exceeding safety parameters. Initiating enhanced synaptic flush protocol. Level Gamma. Before I could even register the escalation, level Gamma, the flush hit. It wasn't just the jarring lights and sounds from before. This was an assault. Intense, rapidly shifting patterns of harsh, colored light. Reds, yellows, searing whites. Burned my retinas even through closed eyelids. Multi-layered frequencies, ranging from bone-jarring subsonic rumbles to piercing, ultrasonic shrieks that felt like needles drilling into my brain, hammered against my eardrums, vibrating through my skull. It felt like my brain was being scoured, sandblasted, forcibly wiped clean not just of the memory fragment, but potentially of everything. The process was agonizing, reducing thought to pure sensation, leaving me gasping, disoriented, nausea churning violently in my stomach. When it finally stopped, the silence that followed was deafening, absolute, terrifyingly empty. The restraints retracted with soft clicks. Synaptic flush complete, the voice stated, unnervingly back to its usual monotone. Exit the pod. Proceed immediately to Medical Bay Delta for neurological assessment. Medical Bay? Not the logging station? My limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. My head felt strangely empty, hollowed out, yet simultaneously buzzing with a high-frequency residual static unlike anything I'd felt before. The phantom sensations of the core, the rust and blood, the jagged teeth, were gone, yes, but replaced by a profound sense of disorientation and a deep, gnawing fear. What had that enhanced flush done? What contamination had occurred that required such a violent purge? Shakily, I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the pod. The sterile blue light of the room seemed too bright, abrasive. Following the newly illuminated green floor panels, leading not towards the logging station, but in a different, unfamiliar direction, felt like walking through a dream. The white walls seemed to pulse faintly, the silence hummed with unseen energy. Medical Bay Delta was another sterile, blue-lit room, larger than the integration suite, dominated by a large diagnostic scanner resembling a more complex version of the pod, surrounded by humming consoles displaying intricate biological and neurological data streams. The bald supervisor with the pale eyes, the one who had placed me on level amber, was waiting for me, his expression grim, unreadable. Ms. Eris stood beside him, arms crossed, her sharp features set in a mask of cold neutrality. Neither spoke as I entered, their silence amplifying my dread. "Lie down, archivist," the supervisor instructed, gesturing towards the scanner couch. His voice was flat, clinical, but his eyes held a sharp, analytical intensity that felt like being dissected under a microscope. Too numb and disoriented to argue, too afraid of what refusal might mean, I complied. Restraints clicked into place again. Sensor pads, cold and metallic, were attached to my temples, my chest, my wrists. The couch slid smoothly into the scanner's humming aperture, enclosing me in the narrow, slightly claustrophobic tube. Initiating neurological deep scan. The supervisor's voice echoed slightly from outside the scanner. Monitoring for residual resonance patterns, synaptic fragmentation, cross-node imprinting, and organic marker persistence. The scan began. Not painful like the flush, but deeply invasive. Faint magnetic pulses resonated through my skull, making my teeth ache. Shifting colored lights, mostly blues and greens, played across my closed eyelids in complex patterns. Faint tones and frequencies, shifting rapidly, probed my auditory pathways. It felt like my very consciousness, my memories, my neurological structure were being meticulously mapped, dissected, searched for the lingering taint of node 801, the scattered fragments of 734, and the persistent, terrifying organic marker. Lying there, helpless, vulnerable, trapped in the machine's analytical embrace, the anonymous warning echoed again. Connection weakens the barrier. Had I irrevocably damaged something within myself by connecting to the bleeding core? Or worse, had I allowed something from the core, something scattered by the flush, something non-human, to gain a permanent foothold within my own atypical neurology? The silence within the scanner hummed, offering no answers, only amplifying the cold, terrifying possibilities. The deep scan felt like an eternity, trapped within the humming, probing confines of the diagnostic machine. Every pulse, every flicker of light against my closed eyelids felt like a judgment, a search for the alien contamination lodged within my neurology. Anomalous organic marker detected. Trace signature, non-human origin. The supervisor's words replayed, chillingly clinical. What was it? A fragment of the predator from node 734? Something else entirely, awakened by the core's bleeding? Finally, the invasive probing ceased. The magnetic hum faded. The couch slid smoothly out of the scanner tube, depositing me back into the cold blue light of the medical bay. Eris and the supervisor stood waiting, their faces grim, studying the complex holographic displays that now hovered above the console, depicting intricate, multi-layered maps of my own neural pathways. Scan complete, the supervisor stated, his voice flat, devoid of any discernible emotion. He tapped a section of the holographic display, zooming in on a specific area deep within the temporal lobe. Residual resonance remains significantly elevated, concentrated around the amygdala and hippocampus, consistent with high trauma imprinting from node 734. He paused, his pale eyes flicking towards Eris. Synaptic fragmentation is surprisingly minimal, considering the intensity of the level gamma flush. Subject's inherent neurological resistance appears robust. Robust? Or just different enough to react in unpredictable ways. Eris stepped forward, her sharp gaze fixed on another section of the display. And the marker? She asked, her voice cutting through the clinical jargon. The supervisor frowned, manipulating the display. Persistence confirmed. Trace signature remains localized. He zoomed in further, revealing a tiny, anomalous point of light pulsing faintly within the intricate holographic map of my brain. It appears dormant, unreactive post-flush, but its organic resonance signature is unchanged, definitively non-human. Origin correlates strongly with node 734. So it was from the predator echo. A microscopic fragment, perhaps embedded during the initial resonance spike, surviving the enhanced flush, now lying dormant within me. My stomach churned. Eris crossed her arms, her expression hardening. Dormant or not, it constitutes a Class Omega biohazard. Protocol dictates immediate containment and dissection. Dissection? My blood ran cold. They weren't just going to quarantine me. They were going to take me apart to study the marker. Negative, Deputy Director. The supervisor countered, surprisingly firm. Protocol also allows for observational analysis of unique integration phenomena, particularly given subject Kaido's high compatibility and resistance profile. The marker's current dormancy presents a unique opportunity. He looked directly at Eris. Director Thorne's mandate prioritizes understanding the core's instability. This subject is instability manifest. Dissection would yield limited data compared to observing potential long-term integration or rejection. Eris stared back, a silent battle of wills playing out between them. The supervisor held her gaze, unflinching. Finally, Eris gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. Very well, supervisor. Proceed with level red quarantine. Continuous neurological monitoring. But her eyes narrowed, fixing on me with chilling intensity. At the first sign of marker reactivation, the first deviation, the first hint of uncontrolled resonance, dissection protocol is automatically authorized. Understood. Understood, Deputy Director, the supervisor replied smoothly. He gestured towards the two black-clad security personnel who had materialized silently near the doorway again. Escort the archivist to Isolation Chamber Zeta 7. Indefinite observation. Quarantine. A living experiment, constantly monitored, waiting for the alien fragment inside me to wake up, at which point I'd be dissected. The generous compensation felt like a distant, bitter joke. As the guards gripped my arms again, their touch cold and impersonal, despair washed over me. There was no escape. They led me back through the deadened gray corridors of the quarantine wing, the silence amplifying the sound of my own unsteady breathing. Reaching Zeta 7, the biometric scanner chimed. The heavy door hissed open, revealing the empty, sterile box that was now my prison. Inside, Archivist, the synthesized voice commanded. Just as I was about to step across the threshold, resigning myself to my fate, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Not inside the chamber, but reflected on the dark observation panel from the corridor behind me. I froze. Slowly, heart pounding. I turned my head slightly, trying to see the reflection more clearly without alerting the guards. It was faint, distorted by the dark panel, but undeniable. Standing silently at the far end of the long gray corridor, partially obscured by shadow, was another figure. Small, childlike, radiating a faint, sickly yellow light. The figure I'd seen emerge from the breach in the tunnel, the one pursued by the larger shadow entity. It hadn't been an echo from the core. It was real. It was here, and it was watching me. Before I could react, before I could even fully process the impossible sight, the guards pushed me firmly forward into Zeta 7. The door hissed shut behind me, the locks engaging with heavy, final thuds. Plunged back into the sterile silence, I stared at the dark observation panel, but the reflection showed only the empty, gray chamber. The child figure was gone. Or perhaps it was never truly in the corridor, but merely an image, a resonance, bleeding through from somewhere else, triggered by, what? My presence? The marker? The facility's failing containment? The questions multiplied, offering no comfort, only deepening the mystery and the certainty that I was trapped in something far more complex and dangerous than a simple quarantine. The heavy thunk of the locks engaging echoed the finality of my imprisonment. I scrambled back from the door, pressing myself against the cold, seamless gray wall opposite the dark observation panel. Alone. Or was I? The image of the child shadow, faint yellow light against the dark corridor, seen only in the panel's reflection before the door sealed, was it real? A hallucination triggered by the stress, the flush protocols, the persistent resonance clinging to me? Or had I glimpsed another entity loose within Oakhaven's decaying structure, drawn perhaps by the same instability that now held me captive? The silence in Zeta 7 was absolute, unnerving. Not just quiet, but a deep, sound-dampened null that seemed to press in on my eardrums, amplifying the internal noise, the frantic thudding of my heart, the high-pitched residual whine from the level gamma flush, the quiet, watchful presence of the dormant marker behind my thoughts. The featureless gray walls offered no texture, no focal point, creating a disorienting, almost sensory-deprived environment. The air was cool, dry, tasting faintly of recycled polymers. Pacing the small chamber felt like being a hamster in a sterile, featureless wheel. 10 paces one way, 10 paces back. The dark observation panel dominated one wall, an unblinking, indifferent eye. Was anyone watching now? Eris, the supervisor? Or just automated systems, logging my descent into madness? I waved a hand in front of it, shouted, "Anyone there? What do you want?" But the only response was the deadening silence swallowing my voice. Frustration gave way to a chilling despair. Indefinite observation. Quarantine. Waiting for the non-human marker inside me to reactivate, at which point dissection became authorized. How long would that take? Hours? Days? Years? Would they feed me? Provide water? Or was this chamber simply a place to be forgotten, left to decay while they analyzed my final resonance patterns from afar? I ran my hands along the seamless walls, searching for any imperfection, any hidden panel, any potential weakness. Nothing. Just smooth, cold, unyielding gray. The place felt less like a room and more like the inside of a mold, designed to contain and perhaps even reshape whatever was placed within it. As hours crawled by, judged only by my internal clock and the slow ache of hunger beginning to gnaw at my stomach, the silence began to play tricks. Faint whispers seemed to coalesce at the edge of hearing, fragments of the core's bleeding memories, perhaps, or just auditory hallucinations born of sensory deprivation. The gray walls seemed to shift subtly in my peripheral vision. The temperature felt like it was dropping, though the air remained dry. And the marker, it remained dormant, a cold, quiet node behind my thoughts. Yet, I could feel it. It felt like a subtle pressure, an awareness that wasn't mine, constantly observing, analyzing my physiological state, my fear, my despair, processing it with detached, alien logic. It wasn't actively influencing me, not like during the thermal purge simulation, but its presence was a constant, unnerving reminder of my contamination, my altered state. Then, something did change. Not a sound, not a visual hallucination, but a smell. Faint, almost imperceptible at first, cutting through the sterile recycled air. That sickeningly sweet scent, like rotting flowers or diseased fruit, the scent I associated with the breach in the tunnel with the child shadow. It grew stronger, slowly, deliberately, filling the small chamber. My breath hitched. My gaze snapped towards the dark observation panel. Was it coming from beyond? Were they pumping it in? Part of the experiment? No. The scent felt localized, strongest near the center of the room. I took a hesitant step forward, sniffing the air, trying to pinpoint the source. There was nothing there, just empty gray floor. Yet the smell intensified, becoming almost cloying, nauseating. And mixed with it now was another scent, the sharp, metallic tang of ozone, like the air before a lightning strike. The floor beneath my feet began to hum, a low, resonant vibration, different from the facility's baseline thrum, different from the core's pulse. This felt focused, concentrated right here in Zeta 7. Suddenly, the floor directly in the center of the room began to glow. Not red, not blue, but that same sickly, disturbing yellow light I associated with the child shadow. It emanated upwards, casting my own lurching shadow against the gray walls. The light wasn't hot. It felt cold, dead, yet intensely energetic. The humming intensified, synchronizing with the yellow glow. And within the light, something began to coalesce. Not a solid figure, but swirling particles of shadow and static, drawing together, forming a shape. Small, childlike, radiating that faint yellow glow. The child shadow wasn't just reflected anymore. It was manifesting, right here, inside my sealed isolation chamber. drawn by my resonance, summoned by the facility's failing systems, or perhaps it had been in here with me all along, hidden, waiting. The humming reached a peak, the yellow light pulsed blindingly, and the fragmented whispers returned, sharp and clear inside my head. Found you again. Found you again. The fragmented whisper echoed directly in my mind, emanating from the coalescing figure of shadow and sickly yellow static hovering in the center of the isolation chamber. It wasn't menacing like the predator shadow, nor analytical like the marker. It felt plaintive, lost, yet its very presence, its impossible manifestation within this sealed room, radiated a profound wrongness that bypassed fear and settled deep in my gut as pure, existential dread. I scrambled backwards, pressing myself against the seamless gray wall, my eyes wide, unable to tear my gaze away from the impossible apparition. It solidified further, taking on a more defined, albeit still translucent, childlike shape. Vague suggestions of limbs, a head tilted slightly, the faint yellow light pulsing rhythmically at its core. It didn't seem hostile, merely present, observing me with an unnerving, silent intensity. "What are you?" I breathed, the question barely audible even in the dead silence. "How did you get in here?" The figure didn't answer verbally. Instead, fragmented images, tinged with that same sickly yellow, flickered at the edges of my perception. Glimpses of the flickering gaslight alleyways from Sector Gamma, the chaotic energy of the breach in the tunnel, the feeling of being pulled, scattered, lost. Was this its memory? Was it another echo, like the ones trapped in the obsidian cubes, but somehow unbound, freed by the emergency flush? Then, the marker within me reacted, not with curiosity this time, but with a sudden, sharp pulse of what felt like aggression. A cold, analytical hostility directed towards the child shadow. Unstable, fragment. Corrupted data. Threat, level, gamma. Neutralize. Its thoughts, bleeding into mine, were cold, clinical, lethal. Before I could react, before I could even process the marker's murderous intent, my own body moved. My right arm snapped up, hand forming a rigid blade, striking out towards the child shadow with blurring speed and unnatural precision. It wasn't my action. The marker was asserting direct physical control, attempting to eliminate the perceived threat. The child shadow reacted instantly, its form dissolving, flickering, flowing around the blow like smoke. It let out a high-pitched, warbling cry, not of pain, but of fear and surprise, its yellow light flaring erratically. It flowed backwards, reforming near the opposite wall, its childlike shape seeming smaller now, more fragile, pulsing with distress. My arm retracted, trembling slightly, the marker's cold fury momentarily receding, replaced by analytical confusion. Evasive, non-corporeal, resonance, signature, familiar, querying, core database. It was analyzing the child shadow, cross-referencing it with the corrupted core's fragmented library. The standoff held for a tense moment. Me, a prisoner in my own body, host to a hostile alien intelligence fragment. The child shadow, a seemingly terrified, unbound echo radiating corrupted data. And the sterile gray chamber, a silent witness to this impossible conflict. Then, the observation panel on the far wall flickered, not going dark, but displaying something. Stark white text scrolled rapidly across the previously opaque surface, visible only from inside my chamber. Alert! Zeta, 7 containment compromised. Unidentified resonance interaction detected. Marker Kaido, 734 exhibiting uncontrolled aggression. Void entity Zeta Prime stabilizing. Attempting communication. Warning, Potential for cross-contamination cascade. Secondary thermal purge protocol recommendation. Denied. Risk to core integrity. Supervisor Unit 9 override. Initiate passive observation. Log all interaction data. Do not intervene. They were watching. They saw the manifestation. They saw the markers attack. And they were denying a purge, choosing instead to observe. Let the situation play out. Were Eris and the supervisor trying to see how the marker reacted to another anomaly? Or were they interested in the child shadow itself? Void entity Zeta Prime? Is that what was trapped in the corner? Had it somehow manifested the child shadow? Or was the child shadow it? Just as my mind reeled with these questions, the child shadow moved again. It didn't approach me or the marker-controlled limb. Instead, it flowed towards the observation panel, towards the scrolling white text. It raised a small, indistinct, shadowy limb and touched the panel. The effect was instantaneous. The scrolling text vanished, replaced by a chaotic burst of swirling yellow and black static, accompanied by the child shadow's high-pitched, warbling cry pulsing directly from the panel itself. It felt like it was trying to communicate, overriding the observation feed, broadcasting its own fragmented, terrified signal outwards. Was it crying for help? Warning someone? Then, the panel went completely black again. The yellow static vanished. The warbling stopped. The child shadow recoiled from the panel as if burned, its form flickering violently, its faint yellow glow dimming almost to nothing. It huddled near the base of the panel, emitting low, pathetic whimpers, seemingly weakened, perhaps even damaged, by its attempt to interface with the facility's systems. And the marker within me surged again, its cold logic seizing the opportunity. Threat weakened. Vulnerable. Neutralization protocol re-engaged. My arm raised again, hand rigid, preparing to strike the now defenseless echo. Threat weakened. Vulnerable. Neutralization protocol re-engaged. The marker's cold intent surged through me, overriding my own horrified paralysis. My right arm, still tingling with alien strength, raised again, hand chopping down towards the pathetic, whimpering child shadow huddled near the now dark observation panel. This wasn't me. It felt utterly alien, this cold, predatory impulse to extinguish the weakened echo. I tried to fight it, mentally screaming trying to regain control of my own limb, but the marker's influence was too strong, embedded too deep within my altered neurology. Just as my hand was about to strike, to potentially obliterate the fragile manifestation, something else intervened. Not a physical force, but a sound. Or rather, an absence of sound that simultaneously felt like a deafening presence. The low, powerful thrumming from subcore delta, the source of the thermal purge that still faintly warmed the chamber floor, abruptly changed. The steady, resonant vibration faltered, stuttered, then resolved into a new, complex, rhythmic pattern, a sequence of deep, subsonic pulses interspersed with moments of absolute, profound silence. It felt like a heartbeat, vast, slow, impossibly ancient, waking up deep beneath the facility. The effect within the isolation chamber was instantaneous. My descending hand froze midair, the marker's control momentarily overridden, its analytical focus shifting entirely towards this new, dominant frequency. Primary signal? No. Deeper. Origin. Prefinch. Recalibrating. Assessing. Its internal monologue was a rapid-fire burst of confused analysis. The child shadow reacted even more dramatically. Its whimpering ceased. Its faint yellow glow extinguished completely. Its shadowy form seemed to condense, solidify slightly, losing its childlike shape, becoming something denser, more ambiguous, like a knot of pure darkness huddled against the wall. It radiated waves of palpable fear, directed not at me or the marker, but downwards, towards the source of the new, ancient heartbeat. Even the room seemed to react. The residual heat faded rapidly, the air growing bitingly cold again. The seamless gray walls seemed to darken, taking on the non-reflective quality of the void entity I'd encountered earlier, absorbing the faint light still emanating from my own slightly resonant form. What was happening? Had my actions, activating the conduit, triggering the flush, surviving the echoes, created an imbalance so profound it had awakened something even deeper, older than Finch's engine, older than the Keeper's? Something the facility was perhaps built on top of, or designed to contain before Finch repurposed it. The rhythmic, deep pulsing continued, shaking the very foundations of the chamber. Thump. Silence. Thump. Silence. Thump. Each pulse felt like a physical blow, resonating in my bones, making my teeth ache. With each silent interval, the sense of ancient, vast intelligence expanded, filling the chamber, pressing against my consciousness. Then, the observation panel flickered back to life. Not with text, not with images from the core, but displaying a single, stark, geometric symbol. A complex, multi-layered spiral, pulsing slowly with a deep, internal red light, synchronized perfectly with the rhythmic thumps from below. It felt less like a display and more like an eye, opening, focusing, observing. The marker within me went utterly still. Its previous analytical chatter ceased entirely. All I felt from it now was a single, overwhelming impulse, transmitted with the force of a command. Observe. Do. Not. Interfere. Prime. Anomaly. Awakening. Prime anomaly. Was this the true source? The original equation? The condensed knot of darkness that was the child shadow began to vibrate violently, emitting a low, continuous, high-frequency keen, like metal stressed to its breaking point. It seemed caught, trapped between the awakened presence below and the observing eye on the panel. Slowly, impossibly, tendrils of absolute blackness began to seep up through the seamless gray floor around the huddled shadow knot. Not the retreating void from before, but something denser, more substantial, like liquid night flowing upwards against gravity. The tendrils reached, touched the shadow knot, merging with it. The child shadow convulsed, its keening rising to an unbearable shriek. Its form rapidly expanded, twisted, limbs elongating, features melting, reforming into something vast, multi-appendaged, composed of pure, roiling darkness interspersed with flashes of sickly yellow static and tormented, fragmented faces. The echoes it had perhaps absorbed, now being forcibly integrated or consumed. It was becoming something monstrous, ancient, fueled by the awakening power below. The red spiral on the observation panel pulsed faster. The deep thrumming intensified, and the marker within me remained utterly still, observing, analyzing, forcing me to bear witness to the birth of a nightmare drawn from the deepest strata of Oakhaven's tormented existence. The transformation was swift, grotesque. The condensed knot of darkness that was the child shadow erupted outwards, fueled by the rising black tendrils from the floor and the intensifying, ancient thrumming from below. Its form stretched, elongated, limbs multiplying, shadow tearing like wet paper to reveal glimpses of something within, sharp angles, impossible joints, surfaces like cracked obsidian, all pulsing with that sickly yellow static. The high-pitched keening resolved into a cacophony of overlapping whispers and agonized digital screams, the scattered echoes, perhaps, being forcibly integrated into this new, monstrous form. It grew rapidly, filling the corner, pressing against the seamless gray walls, no longer just an echo, but a burgeoning entity of corrupted data and void energy. I remained frozen, pinned not by restraints, but by sheer terror and the marker's unwavering command to observe. The marker itself felt different now, no longer just analytical, but almost reverent in its stillness, utterly focused on the awakening prime anomaly symbolized by the pulsing red spiral on the observation panel and the deep, rhythmic thump, 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 shaking the chamber. It felt like my own consciousness was a tiny, insignificant speck caught between two warring, ancient gods. The newly formed entity, Zeta Prime Reborn, seemed to stabilize, its chaotic expansion ceasing. It now resembled a colossal, multi-limbed insect crafted from pure shadow and flickering yellow static, its multiple, indistinct appendages twitching erratically. It radiated waves of intense cold and palpable hunger, its focus shifting slowly away from the floor, away from the prime anomaly's presence, towards me. The only source of potentially consumable resonance left in the chamber. Just as it began to turn its unseen, multifaceted gaze in my direction, the observation panel displaying the pulsing red spiral changed. The spiral remained, but superimposed over it, faint and translucent at first, then rapidly solidifying, was an image, the black metal pillar from the hidden clearing. Finch's core, the equation engine, projected directly onto the panel, an impossible image broadcast from, where? Below? The effect on the Zeta Prime entity was immediate. It froze, its attention ripped away from me, fixated entirely on the image of the core. Its hungry aura shifted, replaced by something else, longing, recognition. A low, warbling sound emanated from its shadowy mass, almost like a distorted echo of the child shadow's earlier cry. Simultaneously, the marker within me pulsed sharply. Core, signature, detected. Secondary, protocol, objective. Recalibration. Its focus snapped away from the prime anomaly, locking onto the projected image of the core with intense, analytical desire. What was happening? Was the prime anomaly using the image of the core to communicate, to control? Or was this heiress and the supervisor intervening remotely, projecting the image to lure the Zeta Prime entity, to test its reaction, to test my reaction? Before I could puzzle it out, the projected image of the core pulsed in sync with the deep thrumming from below, and the Zeta Prime entity responded. It let out a low, resonant hum, different from its earlier keening, almost like an answer. Then, impossibly, horrifyingly, it began to dematerialize. Not violently, but flowing, dissolving, its shadowy, static-laced form becoming less substantial, flowing towards the observation panel, towards the projected image of the core, like iron filings drawn to a magnet. It was trying to merge with the image, drawn by the prime anomaly's signal, seeking perhaps to reintegrate with the source or system it originated from. As the entity dissolved against the panel, the image of the core flared brightly, then vanished, leaving the red spiral pulsing alone once more. The chamber fell silent, save for the deep, rhythmic thump. Thump from below. The Zeta Prime entity was gone. Absorbed? Transported? Neutralized? The marker within me remained focused on the panel, processing. Entity, signature, faded. Transported? Destination, unknown. Core, projection source. Prime, anomaly. Assessing. Had the prime anomaly just dealt with the Zeta Prime entity? Effortlessly. Was it asserting control over the facility's fractured systems, its escaped echoes? Was it hostile, protective, or merely recalibrating, as the marker suspected, bringing its domain back into alignment? just as a sliver of hope began to dawn. Maybe this ancient presence wasn't hostile towards me. The red spiral on the panel pulsed again, faster this time, and the deep thrumming from below shifted, the rhythm changing, becoming more complex, more insistent, no longer just a heartbeat, but feeling almost like language, like immense, subterranean gears grinding into place, preparing for the next step in its unfathomable process. The warmth that had briefly filled the chamber vanished, replaced by an even deeper, more profound cold than before. And the marker's final thought, cold and stark, echoed in my mind. Assessment complete. Prime anomaly protocol, unknown. Threat level, incalculable. The silence left by Zeta Prime's dematerialization was fleeting, instantly swallowed by the intensifying, rhythmic thrumming from subcore, delta below. Thump, thump thump, silence. Thump, thump thump. The pattern was more complex now, no longer just a heartbeat, but a sequence, a code, vibrating through the cold, seamless gray walls, shaking the very air in the isolation chamber. The deep, profound cold returned, colder than before, radiating upwards from the floor where the black tendrils had seeped through. The red spiral on the dark observation panel pulsed brightly in time with the complex rhythm, its glow casting unsettling, shifting shadows. It felt less like an eye observing and more like a mouth speaking, broadcasting the prime anomaly's intent in a language of subsonic pulses and resonant silence. And the marker, it was no longer just observing. It pulsed in sync with the thrumming, its analytical processes seemingly overwhelmed, shifting into a state of reception. It felt like it was listening to the prime anomaly's signal, decoding the rhythmic language. Thoughts, cold and alien, flooded my consciousness, interpretations generated by the marker. Sequence, initiating. Recalibration, protocol. External, nodes destabilized. Requires, primary. Anchor, resonance, signature. Kaido 734. Primary anchor? Me? The prime anomaly wasn't just awakening. It was targeting me, identifying my unique, contaminated resonance signature as necessary for its recalibration protocol. Was this its solution to the imbalance? To use me as a focal point, an anchor, to stabilize the failing facility, the bleeding core, the collapsing boundaries? The thought was terrifying, not annihilation, but potentially a permanent, conscious integration into whatever ancient system was reasserting control. No, the thought wasn't mine, but it surged with my panic, my desperate will to resist. For the first time since the marker awoke, I felt a flicker of control, my own emotions pushing back against its cold, analytical dominance. The marker recoiled slightly, surprised perhaps by the intensity of my resistance, its receptive state momentarily disrupted. Host resisting. Conflict detected. Recalculating. Seizing the momentary internal struggle, I lunged towards the observation panel. If the prime anomaly was broadcasting through it, maybe I could disrupt it, break the connection, shatter the eye. I slammed my fists against the dark, cold surface. It didn't yield, didn't crack, just absorbed the impact, the red spiral pulsing impassively. Then, the panel changed. The red spiral dissolved, replaced by a new image, stark white walls, polished concrete floor, harsh track lighting. The gallery, a live feed just like before, but the scene was different. The paintings were gone, ripped from the walls or melted into grotesque puddles on the floor. The crystalline entity was nowhere to be seen, and standing in the center of the ruined space, facing the panel, facing me, was Ms. Eris. She wasn't looking at a camera. She was looking through the panel, directly at me, her sharp features illuminated by the same faint red light pulsing from the spiral, now superimposed faintly over her image. Her eyes weren't analytical anymore. They glowed with that same deep red intensity. She raised one hand, pressing it flat against her side of the panel, mirroring my own position moments before. The recalibration requires a willing anchor, archivist. Her voice echoed, not from the panel, but directly in my mind, layered, resonant, undeniably influenced by the prime anomaly. Resistance is inefficient. Embrace the sequence. Become the anchor. Preserve the equation. She wasn't just observing. She was part of it. An agent? A host? Had she always been? Or had the prime anomaly's awakening subsumed her? Join us, Kaido. Eris's/the anomaly's voice purred mentally, the sound vibrating with the deep thrumming from below. Stabilize the boundary. Become eternal. Become complete. As she spoke, the faint red spiral overlaying her image on the panel began to extend outwards, filaments of red light reaching through the glass, through the sterile gray wall, into my chamber, reaching towards me like tendrils of pure, resonant energy. The prime anomaly wasn't just observing or targeting. It was actively trying to connect, to make me the anchor, willing or not. The marker within me pulsed frantically, torn between its imperative to observe and its instinct to resist this overwhelming primary signal. And my own will felt like a flickering candle flame against an oncoming storm. Join us. Become the anchor. Preserve the equation. Eris's/the anomaly's mental voice wrapped around my consciousness like suffocating vines, pulling me towards the pulsing red spiral projected on the observation panel. Filaments of raw, red energy extended from the panel, writhing through the air in the isolation chamber, reaching for me, promising integration, eternal servitude to the prime anomaly's unfathomable calculation. The deep, rhythmic thrumming from below intensified, shaking the chamber, synchronizing with the frantic pounding in my chest. The marker within me pulsed, no longer resisting, but resonating with the prime anomaly's signal, seemingly accepting the inevitable integration. Its cold thoughts flooded mine. Primary anchor protocol accepted. Host integration imminent. Optimal pathway for system stabilization. It was betraying me, choosing alignment with the greater, more powerful frequency over the survival of its host. My own will felt like a flickering ember about to be extinguished by the overwhelming psychic pressure. No, I wouldn't be consumed. Not by Finch's machine, not by the echoes, not by this ancient, subterranean intelligence. Rage, pure and defiant, surged through me, momentarily pushing back the marker's cold influence, pushing back Eris/the anomaly's insidious pull. If the connection weakened the barrier, if my resonance was the key, then maybe I could overload it. Maybe I could break the sequence. Finch's final, frantic note flashed in my mind. Ticking is the key. Follow the rhythm. Synchronize. Sever. He wasn't just trying to stabilize. He was trying to sever his connection before arrival. Severance required synchronization. The red energy tendrils were inches away now, crackling, reaching. The prime anomaly's thrumming filled my very being. Instead of fighting it, I focused on it. Embraced the rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Silence. Matched my breathing, my heartbeat, my intent to that complex, ancient pattern. And then I poured everything into it. Not just synchronizing, but amplifying. All my fear, my anger, my fragmented memories, both my own and the scattered echoes I'd absorbed. All the chaotic energy of the bleeding core, the terror of node 734, the placid otherness of 801, the marker's own alien resonance. I focused it all, channeling it through the marker, through my own unique, unstable signature, and pushed it back along the connection, directly towards the prime anomaly, towards Eris on the panel. An overload. A feedback loop. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Eris slashed the anomaly's projected image on the panel screamed, a soundless, psychic shriek of pure agony that shattered the connection. The red spiral exploded into blinding white light. The reaching energy tendrils snapped back violently, imploding. The deep thrumming from below abruptly cut out, replaced by a deafening, tearing, grinding sound, like the mountain itself ripping apart. The entire isolation chamber bucked violently, throwing me from my feet. Cracks spiderwebbed across the seamless gray walls, floor, ceiling. Not just cracks, but fissures, revealing glimpses of raw, chaotic energy, swirling static, flashing colors, fragments of impossible geometries. The space between realities, perhaps, bleeding through as the facility's fundamental structure failed. The observation panel went black, then shattered outwards in a shower of dark, non-reflective shards. The wall behind it dissolved into swirling static. Escape, scrambling through the opening. Ignoring the searing pain from burns and cuts, I found myself not in an observation room, but back in the administrative corridor, now utterly devastated. Walls had collapsed, revealing the raw rockcrete of the mountain. Fires burned sporadically, fed by severed power conduits. The air choked with smoke and dust. The klaxons were finally silent. Oakhaven was tearing itself apart. There was no sign of Eris, the supervisor, or any other personnel. Only ruin. My own survival felt like a statistical impossibility, a glitch in the Cascade. Driven by a final surge of adrenaline, I stumbled through the wreckage, following the faded emergency signage towards the surface elevators, praying they still had power. Behind me, I could hear the deep, groaning sounds of the facility collapsing further, the abyss below reclaiming its due. Miraculously, one elevator responded. The ascent was agonizingly slow, jerky, the car groaning in protest. When the doors finally hissed open, they revealed not the sterile docking bay, but the raw, unfinished rockcrete of the tunnel leading outside, towards the automated cargo hauler that had brought me here. Bursting out into the cool, pre-dawn mountain air felt like being reborn. The hauler sat waiting, its door open. I didn't hesitate. Scrambling inside, I slammed my hand on the emergency departure control. The door sealed. The engine hummed to life. The hauler disengaged from the hidden dock and began its silent, automated journey back towards the distant city lights, leaving the dying Oakhaven Institute to collapse into its own self-made abyss behind me. I leaned back against the cold metal wall, gasping, shaking, bruised, burned, but alive. The marker inside me was silent, dormant, destroyed by the feedback loop, or simply waiting. I didn't know. My head throbbed, filled with the ghost echoes of impossible sounds and fragmented memories. I had survived, escaped, but Oakhaven, Finch's equation, the prime anomaly, the echoes, they weren't just a place. They were a frequency, a resonance, and part of that resonance was now indelibly woven into me. I carried the static, the whispers, the cold analytical presence, out into the world. The archives weren't destroyed, merely relocated. Inside me, and the chilling question remained, was I the archivist, or just the newest, most portable exhibit? The journey back to the neon-drenched decay of Neo-Kyoto felt less like a return and more like the beginning of a different, more insidious kind of haunting.